Petworking is presented by Maya Strategy Group, a leading market research and strategy consulting firm, helping clients in the pet care and animal health industries navigate strategic challenges for almost 2 decades.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petworking. I'm Peter Kenstead, Vice President and Partner at Maya Strategy Group, and I am here today with a very exciting preview for SuperZoo 2024, bringing back some esteemed guests from previous episodes. This is the largest discussion we've had on Petworking to date, and a great collection of people who I admire and respect very much. I'm thrilled to have with me today Dr. Greg Aldrich, COO of Nulo Pet Foods, Greg Kean, VP of Global Innovation and Nutrition at Wellness Pet Company, and Dr. James Templeman, Director of Nutrition at Primal Pet Foods. These are all thought leaders in the nutrition spectrum in the pet food realm. Their companies have all taken great lengths to bring new innovation and new studies to market in the past year, which we've discussed on previous episodes. We've talked about Primal's Kibble in the Raw and their studies that Dr. Templeman has published in the Journal of Animal Sciences around the benefits of raw and freeze-dried nutrition. Dr. Aldrich and Nulo recently came out with Nulo Gently Cooked and Nulo Cold Pressed, which are also expanding the realm of fresh, frozen, freeze-dried. And Wellness has had freeze-dried inclusions in its food for a long time. And Greg and I talked earlier this year about the steps they've taken to kind of go back and put their entire portfolio through AFCO feeding trials to prove the nutritional value that it can offer and hopefully garner additional recommendation from veterinarians and additional confidence with pet parents. So as we come to SuperZoo, I thought who better than to get these 3 gentlemen together in a room to talk about what can we expect to see at the conference from a nutrition perspective. What new innovations are they hoping to see, expecting to see, and any teasers they might be able to provide about new things that their companies are going to be showcasing at SuperZoo. It's always great to be in Vegas and to start to mark the end of summer with the SuperZoo conference. But here we are a week before and teeing up some anticipation for what's to come. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the 3 of you, and if we can just go around and take a few minutes to talk about what you're expecting to see at SuperZoo and what's on the horizon of pet nutrition in your perspective.
I'll jump in then. So thank you, Peter, for inviting us, and it's always great to hang out with James and Greg on various projects. From a Nulo perspective, what we're expecting to see is a continuation of new products introduced into the marketplace that are focused on optimal processing, and that may be raw, frozen, or could be freeze-dried. And as you and I have discussed, and I think others in the industry have been working on, is products that are using different drying techniques that also are providing some sort of a kill step as part of their safety mechanism. And also what we're trying to focus on are things that are convenient and still shelf stable, so that while the fresh and the refrigerated and the frozen are very popular and continue to grow market share, we also notice that there's some owner fatigue associated with it, and this gives them another alternative.
I can take it from there. And yeah, I got to echo Greg's comments. Thank you very much, Peter, for the invite. A great group you got here and people that I have a ton of respect for in the industry. So I'm just glad to be on this panel in general. But yeah, I also regretfully won't be at SuperZoo next week. But I mean, I always still look forward to these big trade shows, in particular the new product showcase and seeing what other companies are coming out with. On the Primal side of things, we're really just continuing to kind of try to push the envelope with our newest innovation that we launched this year in Kibble in the Raw. Peter, I know we've had some conversations about this, but I truly think that this product fits a lot of the trends that are starting to emerge in the industry, whether it's things like alternatively processed diets. Again, really kind of pushing the freeze dried formulas and all the benefits associated with that, as well as hitting in some of these other key components, things like natural ingredients, organic produce, and some of these items as well. And then really trying to reach consumers at on an economic standpoint as well, and trying to bring an affordable freeze dried or an affordable alternative option to the table, so consumers have a chance to make their way into this space and this segment of the industry, and not have to break the bank maybe the way that they sometimes have to with typical freeze dried options, and give them a more convenient and shelf stable option than some of the frozen or high moisture options that are out there. So that's what we're bringing to the table, at least. And again, I think it really kind of hits on some of these trends that we're going to start seeing to really start emerge at meetings like SuperZoo and Global. So that's what Primal's bringing to the table.
Yeah, I'll follow up with number one. It's very cool to be on with all of you. I've learned a lot from Greg Aldrich personally, so cool to be here on a panel with him. And James, you were part of some really great work that we did at Pet Sustainability Coalition once upon a time. So this is great honor as well for me. I echo a lot of what they're talking about in terms of the whole concept of processing, heat treat, and so on. We obviously saw the beginnings of that at Global, and I think that'll continue. We've been talking about, we've been in certainly, Greg, you've been in the industry longer. I'm not making a statement there. I've been in the industry for 23 years now. And when I came in, we heard a lot about humanization as a trend. And it's amazing because that is continuing, but the stakes keep getting higher and higher and higher in terms of what does that mean in terms of what consumers expect, not just from the health standpoint, but also from the enjoyment, the variety, palatability piece that consumers are now expecting. There's a lot of human part of humanization is that sentiment around, we get bored with the foods we eat if we eat the same thing all the time. So how do we bring that variety and elevate that mealtime experience to pets? And I think that's pushing the industry to really have to sort of in a Venn diagram standpoint, really balance that convenience, affordability, and quality side. Because at the same time, we have this whole backdrop of the last few years with lots of inflation, consumer price index, really challenging disposable incomes of people who are pet shoppers. So those expectations it's creating this tension of lots of expectations in terms of what the food looks like, delivers, smells, all of that. But what people are willing and able to pay for is actually probably gone down overall. So I think that's continuing and will continue to be sort of a challenge for the pet food industry. Is how do we meet consumers' expectations at all three of those points?
Actually, I feed on that a little bit too. Sorry, Peter. I think that's a really important topic to broach here. The kind of combined efforts between giving them giving our pets a great feeding experience, and also at the same time having affordable options out there. I think the other thing we're going to start to see really emerging in the industry, whether it's at this SuperZoo or in the foreseeable future, is the kind of development of functional ingredients, and really having science backed and science supported, whether it's individual nutrients or components within the diet. I was reading a piece from the Carey group. I think they surveyed about 1,900 pet parents in 2023, and even in a pretty challenging economic climate, I think about 50% of respondents were willing to pay more for items that have functional ingredients, but also ones that are science supported in nature. So I think that's going to be a big driver, and also maybe something that kind of throws the balance of that. I think you described it as a Venn diagram in terms of how pet parents best want to support the health and wellness needs of their pets, and really trying to find a balance in affordability, and then those value add functional ingredients that can be incorporated in a lot of these pet products as well. So yeah, I think that's a great point, Greg, and just something I kind of wanted to feed off of a little bit there.
So I get my
Yeah.
turn to tag in on this, and one of the things I find really interesting, and it's a great topic of conversation. We have it around here on a regular basis, is that this notion of cost, or are we pricing ourselves out of the market? But I come back around in a kind of a circular fashion. We're looking at a study recently, and it demonstrated that pet food purchases writ large across the whole of the US was about $2 a day. And yet we're spending about $22 a day on our own food. And so I have to question sometimes whether or not we're truly pet parents, and or whether the pet parents out there that are purchasing these foods in these more premiumized or humanized categories are looking at it in the same vein. And that is they're willing to spend a little bit more of their disposable income on their pet, and or we've got a whole cadre of the population today, especially the millennials and the Gen Z, that, the pet is their child, right? So, I think we're seeing, I love the affordability idea. I'm an old guy from livestock area. We always talked about cost of gain, but this is not what we're playing here. We're actually in kind of a dichotomy of the economy here. So we've got those that are in that premium sector, and those that are in, I'll call the utility sector. And I think there's opportunities here yet to continue down this path to make premiumized, humanized foods that people feel good about. They have a good relationship with their pet. The pet likes the food. They can sense that there's some enjoyment or hedonic experience, and to still do it at an affordable price. And so we've been working through those in terms of, cost per day of feeding, or cost per experience. And hopefully that's data in and of itself that's beyond just the nutritional and the science-based aspects.
Yeah.
I think it's a matrix from what we've seen, in terms of you're balancing costs, you're balancing convenience. And I think you alluded to that with shelf stable, Dr. Aldrich. And then you're balancing, the nutrition and the feeding experience. And Greg, I don't mean to cut you off there, but I mean, I do hear, and I'd love to get your take on this, because I know you and I have talked about it with your AFCO trials, but the idea of science-backed and vet recommended, I think is a really good point as well, along with this idea of minimal processing and affordability. Those are two key themes that I hear coming out of these statements, and I think we can draw parallels to larger trends that we've seen both at previous shows and in the data that's coming out in the market right now. I mean, we're seeing right now, and Greg, you and I talked about this a few weeks back, a downturn in kibble sales, right? And kibble being kind of at its lowest point in a long time. And it's not just the summer downturn, but, it begs the question, is this more people switching to alternative food forms like freeze-dried, fresh, frozen, raw? Is it, smaller bag sizes and people, trying to defray purchases as they wait for inflation to come down and pricing pressures to release? But there certainly is an affordability component that I think is top of mind for lots of people, and balancing that, with the desire to feed a healthy, nutritious diet to their pets. And I think that also swings into where you see the vet recommendation and science back being so important is it's becoming kind of the last frontier for differentiation. It was once the domain of Hills, Roe Canaan, Purina, but now you're seeing, I talked to Greenies at the last show, and their new food offering, they're now distributing through the vet channel with an exclusive partnership with Covetrus. And Greg, I know you talked about, a big part of the, going back and doing the AFCO feeding trials is to give vets that increased confidence to recommend a diet and maybe not gain share through the vet channel, but certainly not lose it because vets are recommending an alternative diet. So I wanted to throw that out there as themes I'm hearing that I think would be fun to elaborate on.
Yeah, well, listen, I think there's been a nice upswing in companies doing testing. We've always done it, not to this degree, but we've always done it. But it's not something we've ever talked about because it's tough to explain to consumers. It could be a hot topic, quite honestly, the whole idea of using validated kennel studies. But it's really the best thing for understanding the performance of your products before it goes into consumers' hands. But in terms of, the affordability piece, I think the interesting thing is that we're seeing, there's no doubt kibble is decreasing as a share of the pool of calories that let's say dogs are ingesting at this point, the share of bowl. And we know where a lot of that is going. It's going to things like toppers, towards fresh alternatives to shelf stable type fresh products. Those calories are coming from other places. There might be some net decreases from either the cat population increasing or more small dogs. I think that's part of it. But I'd say people are absolutely willing and able to spend money on things that bring that elevated mealtime experience with more expensive products. But you don't buy those all the time. If you're buying a topper or a freeze-dried product that you put on top of your dog's kibble, it's a one-time, you purchase it and it's expensive, but you distribute it over a number of meals. Same thing with like a shelf-stable type of fresh product. So how consumers are achieving that elevated mealtime experience in affordability probably runs the gamut, all the way from buying maybe it's the Primal product, all the way through buying a product that could be a utility product, but putting a pretty high-end freeze-dried product on top of that. There's a vast number of variants in ways to approach that as a consumer, and they have to pick the path that works best for their budget.
Yeah, I agree. I think we push this a lot in terms of, I think one of our mottos is building a bowl, and then it, doesn't necessarily have to all be, raw or fresh food. It's about, not just building an experience for your pet, but also including a little bit of variety and diversity in the diet and all the different benefits that can be associated with that, as well as obviously the humanization aspect of it in terms of exactly what you mentioned previously, Greg, right? Our diet differs. Usually day to day, we introduce a little bit of variety. We reduce our food related boredom or what have you with, different ideas and different options added in. And I think that's making it more challenging to differentiate some of these sectors within the industry, because exactly what you alluded to. Yeah, you may be seeing slight decreases in overall sales related to kibble, but your increases are spread over so many different segments and options that are out there. And the other thing, and you mentioned this earlier, Peter, I think you just mentioned the word differentiation. To me, I think that's becoming increasingly more challenging for manufacturers. We talk about all these hot topic things like functional ingredients and affordability and shelf stability and alternative processing. But if you go to these shows now, it almost seems like everybody is producing sustainably sourced alternative products with good shelf stability and all these other aspects. So it's almost like you focus on taking multi-hurdle approaches to pathogen prevention, and it's almost like we have to take multi-hurdle approaches to differentiation when it comes to products in the market now, and really try and take a piece from a bunch of these different sectors and try and make a combined approach to try and set yourself apart from what is becoming a fairly saturated market in some of these new items. So I just wanted to comment on that. The word differentiation really kind of made me think about how challenging it is anymore for us to differentiate, or not just us, any manufacturer to differentiate themselves on store shelves. And I think places like SuperZoo are a good opportunity to introduce some of those differentiating factors, but you're almost having to hit one or two or three check boxes now, where maybe only a few years ago you only had to hit one or two. So I think it's just becoming increasingly more challenging.
So I'm going to jump in here and talk a little bit about the point that you brought up, Peter, and then you shared it from one of the other guests, is that the kibble sales are relatively flat. And we've been seeing that across a lot of different segments of the business. I agree with that. I think that's part of this variety, this differentiation. We've all been looking for different food formats, other ways to deliver the same sort of nutrition, maybe a better consumer experience. And the traditional kibble, while I think it's always going to be the base of the meal that makes the build the bowl kind of concept, it's that baseline. We're not adding a lot of dogs or cats into the population now, so the calorie content writ large is relatively constant. So if that kibble is the base and we continue to feed into that, then the opportunities to grow the industry have been in these toppers. They've been in the alternate food formats. They've been in the treats, the supplements, and the rest. And that's where I think, coming back to the SuperZoo trade show, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of activity in the new product showcases. It's going to be a lot of supplements and treats and toppers, and whether or not that builds the industry or not, whether it improves dog or cat nutrition is, we'll leave that question for the future. But I think at some point, we're going to over-nutrition the animals, and we've got to start to get back to some fundamentals of nutrition and discuss a little bit more with our consuming public of when we add, we don't subtract. And so the idea of new and simple things that we add to the diet, simple's not easy. And I think there's an opportunity here for us in the science side of the equation to continue to help improve the nutrition understanding for our consumers. And that's a tall order. That's not easy to do. And I think we're trying to do it, each of us in our own special way, through communication and product, and it's what it delivers. And it'll be a while before we get to that perfect pet food, but I think we're all collectively doing our best to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know, Greg, you and I have talked about it before, and I'd be curious, from the perspective, James and Dr. Aldrich's perspective, both your companies have a product that uses cold press manufacturing, right? And when we look at educating the consumer, Greg, you and I have talked about, with freeze dried, there's a lot of nutritional benefit there, but for a lot of people, it gets equated with astronaut food, right? What is freeze dried? They don't really know what to do with it. I'd be curious, and Greg, maybe starting with you, what's your take on what's the best way to educate your everyday pet parent, for people who aren't, on the inside of the industry and living and breathing this like we all are every day? How do we kind of take a step back and, help to inform, the consumer, so that we can advance, better nutrition for all pets?
Well, that's a tough question, so I'll let the other Greg take it since you didn't say it.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so I'll rise to the challenge here. How do we do it? Well, I've thrown out some really crazy ideas, but at some point in the future, and this is going to go off topic, okay? So bear with me, guys. But I think at some point in the future, we've got to get the consumers to pay for some of the research that we are doing to get their products improved. And in lieu of that, we'll also provide some education. I think pets in the classroom, pet nutrition in the classroom would be a wonderful way to do that. But nobody's bringing that to the table at the moment. So how do we get consumers, how do we get educators to embrace pet nutrition in the classroom so we can use the pet as the model for helping them learn their own nutrition? It's going to have to be the federal government gets involved and actually puts some money into the pet food or pet nutrition. Maybe we get some checkoff dollars. Maybe we reorganize some of the associations so that they're putting funds in for education that are across the platform. They're not just one competitor versus another. So I think it's a bigger question than just a brand. I think it really goes to the whole industry. How's that for political opportunity?
Well, you go, James.
I was going to say, I mean, I think I think you hit the nail on the head there, Greg. I think this has to be a much more holistic approach to education than we maybe consider. And I like your comments about a little bit of federal influx of money when it comes not just to promoting the educational aspects, but also, there's such a demand for research, whether that is research associated with specific products or formats of feeding, or maybe we're taking research all the way back to looking at how we can more accurately estimate requirements of different nutrients. If maybe you're thinking of a sustainability approach, if you're talking protein and amino acids. So, but also, they're without cash, it's hard to facilitate research. We think we all know and can appreciate that. So yeah, some federal approach to a little bit of influx in cash would be nice from an education and research side of things. And I'll just say personally, for us at Primal, what we really try and do is push a lot of education when it comes to those in retail stores. So we put a lot of emphasis on having a retail training specialists that attend our, that make visits periodically, do on-site, do online training, and really just try and not push the marketing or, the clickbait aspects of our products, but really try and push the idea of how we can best nourish pets out there, whether again that's with entirely primal products or whether that's with a bowl that consists of many different items, one of which we hope will include a primal product. But I think really getting into retail stores and trying to work with and educate those that are speaking with and conversing with consumers every single day about nothing more than pet products is at least the way that we feel we can try and kind of infiltrate that consumer and hit them with a little bit of education that'll be well received and will be done in a manner where you're surrounded by the products you're about to purchase. So that's at least a way in which we try to approach the education side of it.
Yeah, listen, I would love nothing more than every pet consumer to be so interested in pet food nutrition that they, spend, their time when they're not working or hanging out with their pet or family or hobbies, that they're doing, nutrition research on pet nutrition. But consumers aren't even doing that on human food, really. I mean, it's a really small portion of consumers that do that. We're geeks, right? I mean, we're so this is what we do. We love it. I'm sure we all follow human nutrition trends and research and listen to this stuff and podcasts on our own because we love it, and that's great. And we also love innovating, in this space. But the truth is, consumers are really busy. We're busy too, but this is our job. There are consumers that are just really busy, and if you could explain it to them in 140 words or less, then I think they might listen. But I would say a lot of the education, it's really two parts of it. We have to meet consumers where they're at. And if they're on TikTok, then that's where you need to meet them. If it's educating them in 15-second clips and they'll listen to it and, get through the whole 15 seconds, then fantastic. But on the base side of it, I think as brands, I would love nothing more than there to be a lot of government funding. But in absence of that, I've said this, to my teams from the very beginning, we have a responsibility when we're feeding cats and dogs complete and balanced nutrition. Of course, there's marketing that has to be involved. We have to tell our story, but the job number one is to get the product right. And ultimately that is conveyed through brand trust over time. Again, I'll say this because no one would know this except for the people that work at Wellness that we did this. But when we introduced a plant-based product a few years ago, that it's no longer on the market because consumers, despite really being interested in sustainability quantitatively, when it comes to sort of voting with the dollars, it didn't necessarily translate. But we kind of looked at this diet and we said, this is pretty novel. We've never made a diet like this before. We're going to put this through a 6-month AFCO feeding trial before we launch this to the market. And that's what we did. And that was more of like an internal sense of responsibility. How do we communicate that to consumers? Without sounding pious or whatever, I don't exactly know, but in the meantime, I'm very content knowing that we will approach pet nutrition the right way and do our best to communicate and build that trust over time. But that's a difficult thing to communicate to consumers. It's really difficult.
Yeah, there's a couple challenges, I think that, we make nutrition easy for kids. It's something that we're taught in school, right? There's a table, there's, eat your fruits and vegetables and, X many servings of meat. And, as you have pointed out, Dr. Aldrich, on the episode when we spoke previously and brought up again today, it all comes from the NIH, and, there are federal dollars that go towards that. And it makes it pretty simple to think about, okay, am I checking these boxes? When we're doing it, at a pet level, I think a lot of everyday consumers are challenged to look at pet food packaging and look at a pet food label and understand, the trust just goes to like, okay, somebody's done the research here, somebody's tested this diet, and then it comes, down to the cost and affordability component, right? I think everybody would love to be able to feed themselves, filet mignon and lobster every meal, and to feed their dog, fresh cut salmon and, Wagyu beef and whatever, but that's not the economic reality. And, we do talk about like, people are dabbling in and there's a downturn in kibble, but, the other side of it is, we see, as you said, Greg, there's more small dogs in the market. It's easier to feed a small dog a more premium diet because you don't have to spend as much. The episode we just did with Hills on state of shelter pet adoptions, large dogs have seen 100% increase in length of stay since 2019. And a big part of it is because people don't want to incur the expense associated with feeding a 70-pound dog. So I think, there is this lack of awareness about what constitutes appropriate nutrition, and then, what is being billed as like premier nutrition is at the most expensive end of the spectrum. And so I think people just default, through consumer in a lot of cases, unless they are, your outlier customer, they default to what's available in the grocery store or what's on sale, or my dog likes this and they eat it. And, I'll be curious to see, how we continue to see more small dog specific diets come out and, and catering to that end of the spectrum. We've seen the French Bulldog become the most popular dog in America, displacing the Lab. But I know, the goal with kibble and the raw was to provide affordable freeze dried and convenience and check those boxes, but it's still more expensive. And same thing with Nulo cold pressed. Do you see, are there innovations in getting back to your point about simplicity and introducing simplicity, Dr. Aldrich, where, we can give pet parents a cost-effective, proven nutrition option, or how do we feel about that?
Lot into that question, Peter. Let me see if I can start with it in this regard. I think there's an opportunity for us to communicate that there's a quality consumer experience, and so I'm going to assume that nutrition is a fundamental value. We've all qualified our formulas to meet all of the AFCO nutrient profiles and be digestible and all the rest of it. At that level, beyond that, then we start talking about the consumer experience. And I don't want to call it entertainment, but in essence, we have those disposable dollars and we want to know where we're going to spend those, and we're making those value-based decisions. And part of that is if I see something that I know my visual aesthetic appeal, my aromatic appeal, it smells good, I feel good about it purchasing it and feeding it to my animal, and my animal, my dog or cat, it really seems to get some satisfaction at it, I'm going to repeat that purchase. And that's going to go into that value equation, that value understanding of whether or not it's something that I feel good about. And so, you know, sometimes we get into, as scientists, we get into this very rigid sort of mechanistic approach, but there's a human behavior, there's a hedonic experience, there's an emotional play in what we're trying to do. And I don't think we want to overthink it for the consumers. The consumers need to feel good about what they're doing. And if they've made that value-based decision that this makes me feel good, it makes my companion pet feel good, I want to continue that experience. And I think that's where a lot of the differentiation in the market's happening today. It's not always about economics. It's about whether or not I feel like it's of value to me and my family member. And that's going to continue to get the vote. And I'll use the cat world as an example. We've introduced a large variety of cat foods and formulas in the last year. I think our count for total food is about 117 SKUs this year, and probably 2/3 of those have been going into the cat side of the equation. And cat owners really seem to love variety, and their cats respond to that variety with an expression of interest when the new food has been introduced. And cat folks are very variety driven because of it. And so that variety, that additional value that they're assigning to it may not be considered in their monthly budget, but they're doing it either on impulse or by emotion, and they're making a decision. Our job, my job, is to make sure that when they make that decision to support their emotional and their cat's emotional or hedonic experience, that it's truly an effective nutritional product. It's safe, it's wholesome, and that everybody gains from the experience.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what I would add. I think he's spot on. Like, I think we have focused a lot on value and economical or more utility based options. But I mean, I do agree with Greg. I think so much more precedence has been put on introducing variety for our companions, finding things that they enjoy and that create an experience for them at feeding time that prevent the repetitive potential boredom that comes from eating the same conventional diet day in and day out. So I do think that even though price and cost per day of feeding is seemingly top of mind with most of our consumer base, I do think at the end of the day there's Greg said it, an emotional attachment to wanting to create this experience for your companion. So I do think that the attention of a lot of manufacturers will be, yes, that price per day of feeding is in back of mind, but it's probably not necessarily going to be a big driver in the innovation pathway that we see in coming years. It'll be something that is factored in, but I do think that much more of it is going to be paid to, palatability, piece size design, what the inclusions might be, how we can drive that taste, that texture, that aroma that our pets are going to, that it's going to appeal to our pets and create a little more of a value add experience. So yeah, I'm not saying that it's going to take a back seat to any of that, but I just think it'll be one of many factors that are accounted for in the innovation process moving forward, and not that primary driver.
Yeah, and on that, to address the affordability, I mean, there's a pack size, that you could also impact. I mean, we're launching a number of cat products in pouches that are of a size that it gives you all of that great hedonic sort of look, feel, the experiential end for the cat consumer, but you're not going to spend a lot of money to provide that experience. So you still get that wonderful experience as part of your daily regimen, but it's not the complete source of calories as well. So there's I think a lot of brands are approaching it that way, and especially with cats, where portion sizes, it's okay to be smaller and approach it that way. I mean, we saw the advent of like the lickable treats. I mean, that's a really nice size and portion to provide your cat have that really great experience from a taste and a bonding experience. Because let's face it, everyone wants their cat to like them. Even if you have to bribe them into it with something tasty. But that world of cat and element of experience, and I'd add fun as part of that now, especially with Gen Zs. How do you bring that food experience and not just elevate it for the cat, but make it fun to feed your cat with a product that appears fun, looks fun, and also provides great nutrition and great palatability.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and I know we've talked about, maybe the cost per day in terms of what people are spending to feed their pets doesn't necessarily reflect it. But, I get the same level of satisfaction when Beanie's jumping up and is excited about, me putting something in her bowl that I do when my kids are, asking for a second helping of the dinner that I made. It triggers that same emotional response of like, okay, I did something good for my kid, right? And it is interesting. I have experience using all of your products, but I think the other thing that I will say is that I've heard that definitely true from personal experience is there needs to be variety, because if I feed her the same thing again and again, I've got to switch up flavors, I've got to switch up textures. Part of that, I think, is because she's older and, is a senior dog, but like, it's still, you don't want to experience that. And, I guess, to kind of throw it back over, like one of the hot button issues the last, several years has been fresh. And I know, each of your companies has, experience with it in some form or fashion. Primal, you guys do raw, freeze dried, kibble in the raw. Greg, Wellness, got into frozen refrigerated and then exited frozen refrigerated, but clearly you tested that out. Dr. Aldrich, you guys just launched the gently cooked. Where, we're in a time where we have, the farmer's dog. I feel like every time I turn on YouTube, I get a farmer's dog commercial. And, they're clearly popular, but everything I've heard, it's not profitable. Where do you see the debate around, fresh frozen, fresh shelf stable? What do you see? What can we expect? Do we see more fresh shelf stable coming? Or do we see, more of a trend towards a kibble in the raw or Nulo cold press type diet? What are your thoughts there?
I think James ought to jump on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to it. It's a challenging perspective for us. I mean, we've been doing raw for 23, I think maybe going on 24 years. So that, that fresh space has been the essence of Primal for a very long time. And the shifts that we've made in our portfolio have been based on trying to infiltrate the market to a greater degree and meet some of those different needs that the consumer base has. I don't see anything but acceleration in the side of fresh or natural or minimally processed pet foods moving forward. I think it's really taken a pretty strong hold in the industry, and consumers seem to be very, they seem to appreciate having those options there, and they do seem to appeal to them, whether it is the marketing pieces of that or maybe the feeding experience on the side of their pet. I don't see that trending downwards at any point in time, but I do think that the complexity is really going to be trying to continuously meet those changing needs of a consumer while having appealing products. Again, when it came to us, I think it was about 14, 15 years ago, introducing into the freeze-dried space, it was because, we felt as though we'd maximized the consumers that were willing to have a chest freezer in their house and thaw patty of frozen product and, and have that experience for their pet. And so we realized there was, a much larger community of people out there that would be willing to offer these fresh options, but maybe didn't have as much room, maybe didn't want to, purchase a bulk box of frozen patties every month, and maybe wanted that more shelf stable option that was a more convenient way of feeding, that came in more appropriately sized package, that also that maybe they had pets that had been, traditionally fed a dry extruded product. So a lower moisture, more shelf stable, fresh option might be more appealing to them. So I don't necessarily think that we're going to see in the near future a downturn in the trajectory of fresh or minimally processed pet foods. I just really think we're going to see a further expansion in the offerings within this category, really to just try and meet as many consumer needs and desires as we possibly can, especially again as we get shifts in the economy, shifts in, there's people living in smaller spaces, less, large homes associated with some of these generations of people that are really coming into the ownership of companion animals. So yeah, I don't think we're going to see it slow down. I think we're just going to see some expansion within that sector. But that's my personal and maybe a little bit biased opinion, I guess, of where I see it going.
Yeah, I think it'll continue to grow, regardless of the brand. If you put it in your dog's bowl, your dog's going to love it. It tastes good. So there's a certain amount of deprivation when you don't serve it the next day that the consumer will witness. In my case, if I give it to one of my dogs for 2 or 3 days, and then you just give her kibble, she may not eat her food for a day or two. She's not happy because she knows there's more where the original stuff came from. I just think the growth will highly likely come with its usage more geared towards a topper. Every data set we looked at, between 75 and 80% of people use fresh products, for instance, as a topper. There are people who have small breed dogs, to the point earlier about affordability, that it's probably most commonly fed as an entire meal or 100% source of calories with small pets. But as you get into medium and large dogs, it's the usage occasion is going to be more geared towards a topper. And I don't see why that will slow down, as James said, at all. I think that'll continue to grow.
So if I can jump in here, I think these gentlemen have addressed some really critical points, and I agree. I think it's going to continue to grow, although it's not going to be exponential like it was early when we had a very small base. Mm-hmm. I do think it's really fascinating because in essence, this whole category is going through a lot of different technical gyrations. They're trying to, each of the companies that are in this marketplace and some of the new entries into this category are trying to figure out what is the format, how should I blend it together, how do I make the packaging appealing to the consumer when they're going to the store to purchase or have it home delivered. And I would tell you that the consumer experience in some cases is a little off-putting. It's not the greatest visual, physical kind of appeal. And so we've got some fun food science technical issues to kind of sort through. And I think the companies are doing a fantastic job of making, subtle, small changes here, there, and yonder to make it a better experience for the dog and the cat parent. We'll call it that. I get scolded for calling them pet owners, by the way. They're pet parents, right? But anyways, so I think there's opportunity there, continuing to make changes, bring in new ideas and technologies to create a better experience. And I know that logistics and supply chain are always a challenge with these raw, refrigerated, frozen foods. You guys at Primal have been experimenting on this, James, for quite a while. I know, Greg, you guys have been in and out of it. I think Freshpet's done a fantastic job of trying to kind of push the envelope in a couple of areas, and in the raw refrigerator case kinds of products. And so I think there's technical challenges that we're still trying to overcome to make it a better experience. There's logistics, supply chain. There's sanitation, food safety challenges. And then, if you find a consumer that wants to try this and they purchase it and they bring it home, we assume that dogs and cats have an instinctive craving for raw or refrigerated food at room temperature. But as it turns out, there's an adaptation. I've done this a number of times in my research life where we brought in animals that were already consuming a kibble-based product that was their whole diet, and you brought in something that was raw or refrigerated or it had been processed differently, and there was a period of time where they rejected it until they adapted to it. So, I think there's an animal side of this equation we haven't really explored in great depth. Companies that are in this business probably know a little bit more about it than I do, but I think there's a communication education to the consumer. There's a format. There's a food temperature. There's a lot of aspects that we really haven't explored, and that's why, Peter, to sum it up, I think there's huge opportunity for growth in the marketplace as we get better at making the food formats that work for the pet and the owner, and that it will continue to grow because of that.
It's a good point. I know personally, Greg, I'll give a shout out to SuperZoo's, and I've been playing around with that as part of Peony's diet, and also mixing in Nulo gently cooked and kibble in the raw. But I do my research on Peony, so she gets a lot of different foods. But one thing I've been playing around with the SuperZoo's is like, do I add warm water? Do I add hot water and let it cool down? Like where is she finding, like, and it's interesting because if it's really hot outside, she's obviously not going to, like you or I, you don't want to eat a hot bowl of soup on a steaming hot day. But if it's a cooler morning, like, she gets really excited about having something a little bit warmer sometimes, or, sometimes the rice texture gets her more, or sometimes I found recently, like if I'm giving her, more of a, SuperZoo's type product, that has less crunch, that I actually have to put kibble on as a topper. And that's just, an N of one, but like you said, there are so many different, means that, and tests that we have yet to explore. It'll be interesting. I know we're coming up on time here. I wanted to kind of close out with a couple questions. One on the potential for like an ecosystem and partnerships. One of the things I started to see at Global Pet was the potential for almost like a razor blade model and more collaboration between hard goods manufacturers and nutrition manufacturers. We saw the Wolf Popsicle, and they're making their own like balls of treats, but like it struck me like there's a huge opportunity there for that company to go out and have other companies make ball-shaped treats to put into their proprietary little chew toy, lickable. And I also saw Vital Essentials partner with Kong, and they were doing. I think they said they had bought the Kongs, and for like $5, and they were just including them, but it was a driver to drive sales. It's a brand everybody knows, and here's a partnership where you can put your Vital Essentials in the Kong, and they mentioned that they had a potential partnership with a slow feeder bowl, that they were thinking about. And, I wonder, when we're talking about now where we're seeing, kibble being at like a baseline, and people competing for share for products to use as toppers and as part of rotational diets and things like that, what are your thoughts about, leveraging those ecosystem type plays? Is that, in addition to, vet recommendations and science backed, is that, another avenue to drive growth in a market where we're not, where adoptions are down, we're not seeing a lot of, new pet ownership and things like that?
Potentially, we'd have to look at every. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. The question always is with an organization and the resources and dollars, is that effort around that you spend in the resources you deploy going to net you those households, new households that you didn't have before as part of, or is there a different acquisition strategy? Because I see that those collaborations and partnerships as part of an acquisition strategy to ultimately grow households. And I think with the right synergy, I think 100% it could build a lot of value for a company. But you really want to tease that out ahead of time and just make sure that that effort you're going to deploy away from something else is going to be better suited towards that effort.
Yeah,
I could have summed up that's any project essentially, but I think that stands for this certainly as well.
Yeah, I think he's spot on there. I think obviously there's a lot of cost implications that need to be considered from both sides of that potential partnership. I also think it's a kind of interesting way, coming back to the differentiation side of things, to maybe build a little bit of differentiation into already launched products as well. In my mind, it maybe isn't the best avenue for a new innovation. You're maybe taking a little bit of the highlight away from some of those whatever innovative aspects that you've incorporated into a new product, but I could see it as a nice way to potentially drive value and drive some consumers back to previously launched products that maybe you're having a bit of a challenge with maintaining that stake within the market. But yeah, I definitely have to agree with Greg. I think there's, is the juice worth the squeeze kind of conversation that has to be had with a lot of those partnerships, unless they are, like was mentioned, maybe leading to some kind of acquisition within or between those two manufacturers of those two companies. But at least for a potential for value add or differentiation with previously launched products, I think there could be some value there. But yeah, it's a challenging scenario to really compute whether it's worth the cost and worth that additional expense, but something new.
So on that juice, is it worth the squeeze? I was thinking of this. There was a company last year that introduced a product that was the machine, and then you bought the stuff and it did the mix and all the rest of it. And Peter, I think that's kind of the essence of what you're asking here for. And as my two colleagues have indicated, it's a machine business and a food business, and you're trying to merge them together, and they're two different kinds of businesses. There are some situations where it might work, but most of the time it's an introduction for a product as a marketing campaign, as an example of the Kong with the food insert and that sort of thing. So I'll be frank with you, I don't see it as a big future market category. I think there's so many complications with it, and I think the messaging is really difficult because now you've got 2 or 3 competing messages all at once. And so having worked around marketers enough to know that you've got to keep a clear and succinct message to communicate the values of your product to the consumer, and if you confuse them, you lose them.
That's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, I was looking at it from the perspective of, if there is limited, room to grow, where are the avenues that we can take? But at the same time, it is hard to, put out messaging, I guess it feeds, the Kong or the wolf feeds into that hedonistic experience of, seeing enjoyment. And so maybe there's an opportunity there, but at the same time, if you're also trying to communicate a message of nutrition, does that get lost with the message of the fun that your pet is going to have with this, new toy that complements the treat or the food?
Yeah. I think there's some opportunities, but beyond treats and some of the novelty items, I haven't seen it become what I'll call a significant movement.
That makes sense. Well, I know we're getting, we're pretty much at time. I will close, I think we all have that, one moment each show where, there's that aha wow moment. And I'm always trying to rack my brain and thinking, what would I be really impressed and what would I be super blown away by, to see at the show. And so I guess, in closing, I'll turn it over to each of you. And, what's the one thing that you are really hoping to see at SuperZoo, or, would, pie in the sky just, be that wow moment for you in terms of new innovation at this conference?
That's a great question. I was gonna say more celebrity endorsed brands, of course. No.
How
That's
about
right.
some
We
Olympic
haven't
athletes?
even mentioned. Yeah. Oh, hey, you can bring Simone over. I think she's done competing, right?
That would be
Well,
cool.
she may be there in some sort of representation at our
Yeah.
booth, so come on by.
In person, or are we talking
Well, now I'm not going to go there. I can't tell.
All right. All right. That's
I might
cool.
have to stop by the Nulo booth now.
Yeah.
At least to make myself feel tall.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know if I have any inspiration to give you, Peter. I think this industry is doing a fantastic job of coming up with clever things, and I don't know that I walk away each year or each show with an aha of something I saw that was amazing. Sometimes I look at some things like in years past when it's like, wow, can't we come up with something more original than another CBD or likewise, right? Because it seems like we jump on a topic and we really pound it until it doesn't work anymore, and then we go on to something next. And I'm saying that collectively, not in the criticism. It's just I don't know that I have an inspiration for you other than we're all going to be looking for that next new thing that the consumer, the pet owner, the pet parent is going to go, wow. And you never know it until you see it.
Yeah, I agree with Greg. It's very much, it reminds me in the CBD is a great example, watching my youngest play soccer, all the kids on the field are within like a 4-foot radius of that ball at all times, and when something seems like it could be the next thing, you see it at Global a little bit, then at SuperZoo, or vice versa. You see a lot more of it, and then it crescendos at some point. Yeah,
it was like dental treats.
Yeah, I think Greg said it right. We'll know it when we see it, sort of thing there. But what I'm hoping to see is in some part is a little bit more inspiration around the cat side of the business, quite honestly. The cat population is growing. There's a great New York Times opinion piece about cats are better than dogs, kind of thing. It's worth reading. It's cool. But cats are certainly growing and predominant. So something that we have our eye out on, having a very strong and established wet cat business, and looking for some inspiration in that area is certainly something that I hope to see.
Yeah, and I mean, I would, not to cop out of this, but I mean, I'll very similarly, you don't really know until you're maybe your second or third time through the new product showcase in any of these shows, when you actually do catch something that is, I don't know, at least in my opinion or my mind, truly innovative and very different. And I agree with Greg. The next trade show that you're at, there's now 25 of those items from a variety of different manufacturers. So yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily seeing anything immediately on the horizon that's maybe going to blow us all away, but that's also kind of the point of being blown away by the next great thing, is you don't necessarily see it coming. But I, as a cat dad of 3, I do have to appreciate Greg's comment about hopefully seeing a little more expansion in the feline offering side of things. I think that's something that we can all kind of take to heart when we see what's out there on market offerings, and how, little variety there is for our cats as opposed to some of the dogs out there. So I personally also, I think sustainability's taken such a wild ride in the last couple of years and has been such a hot topic, and so much of the efforts on the sustainability side of things have really been paid to packaging and transportation and manufacturing aspects of sustainability. And I would really kind of like to see the next manufacturer, the next product that really takes sustainability to heart when it comes to the nutritional aspects of it. Focusing a little bit more on those alternative proteins, those upcycled items and upcycled products like that. I just think there's a lot more room for growth in the sustainability sector than just packaging and manufacturing and transportation, even though those are kind of hot topics. So, I'd be interested to see maybe the next wow or aha product that comes down the line that really kind of meets the sustainability piece from a nutrition or from a nutrition side of things. So it'd be nice to see, and maybe that would shock me a little bit.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I would love to see, from a sustainable nutrition perspective, more companies leaning into regenerative agriculture. I know we've seen a little bit of it with Canada, but I personally think that is both a nutritional piece and a marketing piece that has yet to be tapped into, certainly in the pet spectrum, and not even really in the human spectrum. So it'd be pretty cool if we started to see that. And I'm also curious to see kind of where we go with longevity. We've started to see some companies dabbling in it. I know, Greg, you and I have talked about, that there's definitely more scientific validation that needs to go into it. But I'm curious to see how many more companies jump on the bandwagon, because, as you all alluded to, it is watching like a game of youth soccer or a school of fish. Everything's chasing the shiny ball, whether it's CBD or a couple of years ago, it was like peak dental treats. I feel like half the new product section was dental treats. I'm curious. I have a hunch that, it's either going to be fresh, shelf stable, or longevity or something like that, where people are jumping on and we see a lot more proliferation of it. So I'll be excited to see when we get there next week, but it'll, hopefully be a good show. And James, I'm sorry, we'll miss you at SuperZoo, but if Simone is there, I'll take a picture with her for you.
Okay, thanks. That's great. I want you for scale right there. I'm sure it's cool. And honestly, I'm not overly upset with not having to experience the Nevada heat in the middle of August. So
you just walk in a building for 3 days and then reemerge, right?
That's true.
That's right. You can walk off the plane. It'll be 98 to 100 and something degrees, and then get into a cab and navigate the air conditioned infrastructure of Las Vegas, right? Oh, well, cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you all so much. I think this has been an awesome conversation. Definitely has me excited for SuperZoo next week, especially because hopefully I'm going to get to meet Simone Biles. If I can get her autograph from my daughter, I will be a hero. I'm not going to tell her, though, just in case she's not there. Yeah, this is Peter Kenseth with Petworking on behalf of Dr. Greg Aldrich, Greg Kean, and Dr. James Templeman. Hope you all have enjoyed this discussion of potential nutritional innovation at SuperZoo, and we'll circle back and see what we've learned, following the show, and be on the lookout for updates from the show floor. Thanks again for joining, everyone, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, both Greg.
You guys.
Thank you, guys.